You know the story. Someone smiles in public, plays the role of family, and then at home the air turns heavy. A mother-in-law dissects your mistakes like she's grading an exam you never agreed to take. A daughter-in-law tries to stay polite, then feels herself shrinking. And the man in the middle, he claims he loves both sides while letting the damage happen. That's the painful truth nobody says out loud. This isn't just conflict. It's ownership disguised as love. People keep changing the names. Modern family. Equal rights. Live separately. Therapy. Boundaries. Like if you rename the problem, the old emotional machinery will suddenly stop running. But the machinery doesn't care what your wedding photos look like. It runs on hidden fear, hidden need, and hidden power. And it runs through generations like a virus that learned how to wear nice clothes. Welcome back to the hidden self. Today we're talking about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but we're not going to pretend this is about cooking skills or tone of voice. We're going to talk about the psychological architecture underneath it, why it survives social change, why it keeps repeating even in modern households, and why the only real way out usually requires one person to do something that feels emotionally dangerous. Grow up, emotionally detach, and draw a line that cannot be negotiated. If you recognize yourself in this dynamic, good. Not because it's flattering, because recognition is the first step of survival. And if you don't recognize it, you should still listen carefully, because the pattern rarely looks the same twice. Sometimes it starts as, she's just helping. Sometimes it starts as, I only want what's best. Sometimes it starts as a joke, a comment, a glance that makes your stomach tighten. By the time the words become open hostility, the real battle has already started months earlier, inside the nervous system of the people involved. Let's get uncomfortable, because the society you live in is trained to protect appearances, not truth. First, the comforting lie. This is just a typical family conflict. No, some families do fine. They don't get perfect, they get functional. They have clear boundaries, emotional maturity, and a man who understands that marriage is not an additional room attached to his childhood home. In functional households, the mother-in-law is a guest in the couple's life, not the co-author of it. The daughter-in-law is not a rival, and the mother-in-law is not a queen protecting her throne. When people have those conditions, the conflict rarely becomes a war. So if you're in a household where every interaction feels like an ambush, the reason is not destiny. It's structure. The conflict is not a mysterious curse. It's a predictable outcome of emotional roles that were assigned long ago and never renegotiated. Now here's the uncomfortable follow-up. Even when the modern world helps, the emotional structure can still be archaic. A lot of families still operate on a hidden hierarchy, not the hierarchy of money or legal status, the hierarchy of emotional priority. In some families, the man's emotional center is his mother, even after marriage, even after kids, even after he says, I'm an adult. Especially in families where the father is absent emotionally, the mother's emotional survival depends on that son remaining emotionally available. And if he doesn't, the mother doesn't experience it as normal separation. She experiences it as abandonment. That's the psychological trap. The mother interprets independence as betrayal. She doesn't want a relationship with her son. She wants a guarantee of her emotional stability. Let me give you a micro story that feels too real because it is common. Picture a man who tells you, with a calm face, my mother is worried about me. He says it like a neutral fact. But when you watch carefully, the worry always lands as control. He gets messages that aren't requests, they're instructions. She forgets to call you. And somehow he's the one who has to come home quickly. She offers food with hidden judgment. She criticizes your choices in a way that forces you to defend yourself like you're on trial. And the man? He says, don't take it personally. He says, she's old-fashioned. He says, she means well. He says these things because admitting the real dynamic would require him to do the one thing he's avoiding, take responsibility for his marriage as his primary emotional commitment. So the daughter-in-law does what many women do at the beginning. She tries to earn peace through compliance. She thinks if she's softer, the conflict will lessen. If she's respectful enough, the mother-in-law will relax. If she performs gratitude loudly enough, she won't be punished. But here's the dark truth. Gratitude used as payment doesn't buy safety. It buys more control. Because in these setups, conflict isn't maintained by logic. It's maintained by power. The mother-in-law's behavior often comes from a mixture of fear and identity. She built her identity around being the primary emotional figure for her son. Her competence, her influence, her centrality, her sacrifices, her status as the woman who knows best. When the daughter-in-law enters, the mother doesn't simply lose attention. She loses narrative control over what her son's life means. And that loss feels like a threat to her selfhood. Sometimes the mother-in-law will use open cruelty. Other times she will use a weapon that is more effective because it feels moral. She will frame her demands as devotion. She will act as if she is the one being harmed, She will tell stories about how she suffered, about how she worked for years, about how she raised him with love, which subtly means you owe me your obedience. This is psychological manipulation disguised as tradition, and the daughter-in-law, if she's not careful, becomes trapped in a role that destroys her self-respect. She starts making decisions not based on her values, but based on anticipating punishment. She learns to walk on eggshells. She adjusts her tone to prevent another attack. She stops expressing her needs because needs become ammunition. So the conflict looks like a personality clash, but it's not. It's a negotiation over authority. Now let's talk about the man in the middle. Everyone blames women. Everyone thinks the mother is the villain and the wife is either the victim or the villain. But the hidden truth is that many of these wars are powered by a man's emotional cowardice, not cowardice in the cartoon sense. Emotional cowardice is quiet. It looks like passivity. It looks like silence. It looks like I don't want drama. It looks like telling both sides what they want to hear. The man avoids conflict not because he's peaceful. He avoids conflict because he refuses to pay the price of adulthood, boundaries. And boundaries in this context are not a soft conversation. Boundaries are a decision. They are saying no even when your mother's face changes. They are saying no even when your wife cries. They are saying no even when you feel guilty. Adult emotional separation is not a feeling, it's a pattern of behavior. In many families with long-standing emotional imbalance, the son was never allowed to fully become a separate person. His mother might have raised him, but emotionally she kept him attached. He learned that being good means being available. He learned that his independence is ungrateful. He learned that leaving the nest is dangerous. So when he marries, he thinks he's just adding a partner. But for the mother-in-law, the daughter-in-law represents the end of the son's exclusive emotional access. The mother experiences the marriage like a threat to her survival identity. That's why the mother can behave like someone who is witnessing an emotional affair. Even if nothing physical happens, in her mind the bond is being transferred. She sees her son's attention leaving her orbit and going to a new woman. That feels like betrayal, and betrayal activates aggression. Now the daughter-in-law sees something too, but she interprets it differently. She starts feeling disrespected. She feels like she's being tested, judged, measured. She tries harder. She gets angrier inside. She becomes more reactive. She may argue. She may confront directly. She may try to win by proving competence. And that's where escalation happens, because direct confrontation from the daughter-in-law forces the mother to defend her territory. The mother then uses the strongest emotional weapons she has: guilt, sacrifice stories, accusations of ingratitude, and reminders that she is the older generation. In these dynamics, who is right stops mattering. The question becomes, who has authority to define reality? A mother-in-law can interfere in food, clothing, sleep routines, spending, and child rearing. People dismiss this as small things, but small things are how control works. Small things train the couple's nervous system. They teach the daughter-in-law that her choices are not hers. They teach the husband that his marriage can be overwritten. This is why it becomes an invisible prison, and women can get trapped in it because they're taught to be patient. Society praises patience and calls it good character. It praises silence and calls it keeping peace. It tells women, just endure. But enduring without boundaries is not peace, it's self-erasure. Endurance without boundaries is you volunteering to be harmed. Let me make this painfully concrete. There's a common scenario where a couple decides on a plan, a maternity schedule, a budget, a parenting approach, a way of handling holidays. The wife tries to execute it. The mother-in-law interferes with help. She changes decisions, overrides preferences, and then acts surprised that the wife is upset. She says, "I only wanted to help. Why are you so sensitive? Do you see what's happening?" She is attacking autonomy while blaming sensitivity. She turns a violation into a character flaw in the victim. So the wife's anger becomes interpreted as disrespect. And then the husband, who wants to avoid drama, uses a sentence that sounds neutral but functions like a weapon. Just let her do it. She's your elder. That sentence is not peace. It's a transfer of authority away from the wife and away from the marriage. It's a message, your opinion is secondary. And once that message becomes routine, attraction dies. Not attraction in a shallow sense, attraction in the deep psychological sense, respect. When a man fails to protect his wife's boundaries, the wife begins to see him as unsafe. She doesn't stop loving instantly, but love becomes fragile. It starts living under conditions. As long as I don't challenge the system. So the couple's intimacy becomes survival intimacy, not romantic intimacy, survival intimacy. The husband might start living two lives, one in the house, one outside. He might go out early. He might disappear into work, alcohol, gaming, porn, a private online world, or another relationship. Not because he's a monster, but because he can't breathe. He's trapped in a role where he's expected to appease two emotional governments. And when men are trapped, they often choose the easiest escape that feels like control, avoid, lie, delay. Lie looks like, I told her we're doing okay, or I'll handle it, or she doesn't understand modern things, or don't worry, it won't happen again. He says it because he wants the present to be quiet. He says it because he hopes time will fix it. He says it because he refuses to confront his mother's emotional addiction to control. But the truth is, time doesn't fix this. Time only deepens the attachment trauma. Another micro story. A wife learns that her husband's mother is involved. She thinks involvement means she will be supported, but she realizes involvement means surveillance. The mother knows what the wife eats, what she buys, how much she spends, how she sleeps, how her mood changes. And she knows it not because the wife shares openly. She knows it because the husband feeds information as part of maintaining peace. He might deny it, but denial is also a form of cowardice. He's sharing details because it keeps the mother calmer. It gives her data to manage. It gives her leverage. Then when the wife asks, "Why does she know this?" he shrugs. He says, "She cares." Or she asks, or "I didn't think it was a big deal." This is how betrayal becomes normal. Eventually, the wife does what many women do after exhaustion. She stops trying to negotiate and starts building her own empire quietly. She forms alliances with friends. She makes private decisions. She restricts access to her life. She tests emotional independence. And in doing so, she replicates the cycle she hates. Because now she's also trying to win. She doesn't want to be a rival, but the dynamic has trained her to behave like one. Meanwhile, the mother, feeling the shift, becomes more controlling. She uses guilt again. She uses emotional drama. She becomes the victim of your disrespect. She tells relatives. She posts online. She collects sympathy to justify further invasion. If you're wondering why this happens so often across cultures, it's because these systems are not just personal, they're cultural training. Generations of women were taught that influence equals love. They were taught that obedience equals respect. They were taught that a son is an extension of their identity. A father leaving emotionally was not corrected, it was normalized. And then the mother becomes the emotional boss. Now, society adds another layer of confusion. It encourages women to compete for men, not for boundaries. Many people don't realize that the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict is sometimes really a conflict about male identity. When the father is absent emotionally, the son becomes the emotional partner the mother never had the courage to seek. She turns him into the husband she lost. She turns him into the witness of her suffering. She turns him into the meaning of her sacrifice. So when the son marries, the mother experiences the wife as an intruder into a relationship that should never have been there. That's why the mother can behave with such intensity. It's not only dislike, it's grief and fear. But grief does not give permission to harm. Now let's address the part that makes people uncomfortable. Statistics and patterns. There's a reason this dynamic is so prevalent in societies with multi-generational living, strong filial expectations, and gendered emotional roles. In many Asian contexts, women are pressured to be good wives by enduring. Men are pressured to be good sons by maintaining ties with the mother. Everyone is assigned a role, and no one is taught the skill of separating roles. The result is that the husband stays loyal to the mother's emotional demands and loyal to the wife's social expectations at the same time. Two loyalties, two realities, one nervous system under pressure. That is a recipe for emotional leakage, resentment, and avoidance. And then society acts surprised when marriages crack in the first few years. Even the rich and famous are not immune to this. High visibility doesn't protect people from emotional addiction. It just provides better PR. A celebrity mother-in-law can turn a family conflict into headlines. But underneath the headlines is the same mechanism. Who gets to be the priority center of the man's world? The names change, the logic stays. Now, what would actually end the war? Not moral advice, not be patient, not have a heart, not have a peaceful dinner. Those are costumes, they don't change power. Power changes when boundaries change. The boundary is not just a sentence. The boundary is a line that the husband enforces consistently. It's saying, you can visit, but you don't decide. It's saying, you can advise, but you don't override. It's saying, you will not speak to my wife in insulting terms. It's saying, if you keep crossing, you don't get access. And it has to be enforced even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Because if the man only sets boundaries when the mother is quiet, then the boundaries are not real. Boundaries are only real when they cost something. This is where most men fail. They want the benefits of adulthood without paying the emotional price of separation. They want the wife to accept the mother while staying emotionally comfortable. They want everyone to behave, without him doing anything that challenges his mother's authority. But adulthood is not comfort. Adulthood is responsibility. He needs to become the protector of the couple's emotional sovereignty. That doesn't mean being disrespectful to his mother. It means refusing to let his mother treat the marriage like a continuation of the old family system. You can still love your mother. You can still respect her. You can still help her financially if that's agreed. But you cannot let her emotionally supervise your marriage. A man who can't say that is not just immature, he is dangerous to intimacy. Now, when the wife realizes that her husband will not protect her, something shifts. Respect dies first, desire follows, not because the wife is shallow, but because emotional safety is a prerequisite for intimacy. If a woman feels that her husband won't block insults, she starts building defenses. Defenses kill tenderness, and then she starts resenting the entire environment. This is why the conflict is so corrosive. It doesn't just create drama, it creates a long-term emotional conditioning process that trains the couple to associate closeness with threat. The child, if there is one, becomes the hostage of the system. People think children are innocent in this. Children are affected by everything they can sense. Tension, whispering, the mother's crying at midnight, the father's silence. They pick up the emotional pattern and internalize it. Then later, as adults, they struggle to form healthy relationships because the nervous system learned love as control. The nervous system learns safety as conditional. This is generational damage. It's not poetic, it's neurological and behavioral. Children in high conflict households are more likely to develop anxiety, low trust, and difficulty with boundaries. They carry forward the emotional scripts like a family inheritance nobody chose. So when people call this conflict normal, it's a lie that protects the status quo. The truth is, it's a slow harm. Now we need to be honest about another painful part. Sometimes the mother-in-law genuinely believes she is right. Her righteousness can be sincere. She might think she's sacrificing. She might think she's teaching. She might think her demands are love. And she might have been trained to believe that control is what good mothers do. That's why conflict persists. Everyone thinks they're doing what's necessary. Everyone thinks they're defending morality. Everyone thinks they're protecting the man they love. But sincerity does not make harm acceptable. A woman can be sincerely wrong. A man can be sincerely weak. The system can be sincerely cruel. So the exit strategy must be power-based, not logic-based. There is no persuasion that works when the mother-in-law's goal is not your understanding. Her goal is dominance. If her behavior is dominance-seeking, then your reasonableness is merely fuel. She will wait until you look confident, then attack again. She will use emotional timing. She will strike when you're exhausted, and she will do it in a way that makes you doubt yourself. She will call you ungrateful. She will call you disrespectful. She will ask why you can't just accept her. You start wondering if you are the problem. That self-doubt is the trap. The goal is to make you question your perception so you stop drawing boundaries. So here's a brutal tool. Track the pattern, not the words. When the mother-in-law crosses boundaries, do you feel smaller afterward? Do you feel anxious? Do you feel you must justify your existence? If yes, then the conflict is not about etiquette. It's about domination. Now, let's talk about the husband again. Because if you're watching this and you're the husband, you need to hear the truth without excuses. Your loyalty to your mother is not automatically proof of honor. Sometimes it's emotional addiction. Sometimes you're afraid to disappoint her because your identity depends on her approval. Sometimes you think if you enforce boundaries, you will become the bad son. But being a bad son is not a tragedy. Being a present father and husband is a duty. If your mother requires your obedience to regulate her emotions, she has made you her emotional dependent. That dependency is not love, it's a hostage system. And you have allowed it. You might say you don't want drama, but drama is what happens when boundaries are absent. In the absence of boundaries, people fight for leverage. Your silence created the vacuum. The vacuum gets filled by manipulation. Silence is not neutral. Silence is a decision. So if you want the war to end, you must stop participating in it. That means you stop relaying private information. It means you stop allowing your mother to disrespect your wife. It means you stop letting your mother decide what your household values are. It means you stop treating your wife like a tenant in your childhood home. Marriage is not a compromise arrangement where the husband keeps one foot in his mother's emotional territory. If you are unwilling to leave, then you should not be surprised when both women suffer. You are not an innocent bystander. You are a system builder. Now, if you are the wife, your responsibility is different. You cannot wait for your husband to become strong by wishing. You must also stop negotiating with your boundaries using your own pain as the currency. Sometimes women do this. They tolerate insults because they think tolerance will teach the husband. But teaching requires consistent feedback and consequence. Without consequence, the husband learns compliance, not respect. So, you might need to be clear. You might need to tell your husband, I will not accept being disrespected. If it continues, I will distance myself. I will not create a fake peace that destroys me. And if your husband is truly committed, he will respond. He will enforce boundaries. He will disappoint his mother with calm firmness. He will accept that love does not mean access. If your husband refuses, the truth is simple. He prefers convenience over protection. Convenience can feel good for a while. It is comfortable. It lets you avoid conflict at dinner. It lets you keep family harmony for appearances, but it slowly erodes your marriage until love becomes resentment. Now, what if the mother-in-law is the one who also acts nice sometimes? What if she's charming in public and cruel in private? That's not confusion. That's strategy. Emotional abusers often fluctuate. They offer kindness to keep you hopeful, then punish you when you resist. The kindness makes you doubt your interpretation. The cruelty makes you scared to confront. This pattern is how people get psychologically trapped. Don't be fooled by mood swings. Focus on outcomes. After interactions, do you feel safe or smaller? Do you feel respected or managed? Is your autonomy growing or shrinking? If it shrinks, you are not in family care, you are in an influence system. And influence systems do not end with better communication. They end with limits. Now, I want to address something else people avoid: financial dependence. If a man relies on his mother financially, boundaries become theatrical. A person who depends on someone else for money is not fully free to enforce decisions. That's why some households seem stable until the day someone insists on independence. Then the mother's power becomes visible. She withdraws support, threatens the family structure, or uses dependency as leverage. If you are in a situation where the husband cannot protect because he's financially tied, then the solution is not a speech. The solution is building independence: financial plans, separate accounts, clear responsibilities, employment growth, and reducing reliance on the mother's control. Same with housing. If the mother controls the house, she controls the entry. Control begins with permission. If she can decide when you're allowed in your own life, she will. So any discussion about boundaries must include practical reality. Now, let's return to the central mechanism: ownership. In many of these wars, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law are not fighting about chores. They are fighting to define who owns the man's emotional center. The man is treated like territory. Whoever can influence him more becomes the ruler. That's why insults about behavior, food, spending, parenting, and manners are so intense. They are not random. They are symbolic. They are claims: I am the correct standard. I understand him. I know how love should be done. You are outside the acceptable order. And the wife, if she fights as if it's a contest of facts, loses. Because the mother is not trying to learn. She's trying to dominate. A wise woman doesn't chase the mother into her game. She protects her role as wife. She demands dignity. She refuses to treat her autonomy like a negotiation subject. But she also understands something that many women don't want to admit. If she invests her emotional energy into trying to win against the mother, she will eventually lose herself. It will turn her into the very person she hates. So the true strategy is not revenge. The true strategy is self-respect plus enforcement. Now we come to the darkest and most honest takeaway. Love alone is not enough. If power is unclear and boundaries are blurry, love becomes a battlefield. Even if everyone has good intentions, the structure will still generate harm. People will still compete. They will still seek control. They will still avoid responsibility. The emotional machinery will still run. So the war ends only when there is a clear hierarchy of respect. The husband must become the anchor. The mother must accept that her role changes with time. The wife must accept that enduring is not the same as harmony. And everyone must stop treating emotional permission as something inherited. If you're waiting for a magic formula like, be kind and it will improve, stop. That's hope disguised as denial. The formula is boundary plus consequence. Say what you will not tolerate, and then enforce it consistently. No dramatic threats. No silent punishment. Just clear rules that protect autonomy. Now, for men, the conflict only ends when you psychologically detach from your mother's emotional government. You can still be a son, but you cannot remain a son who behaves like a subordinate in his own marriage. A man who is truly grown refuses to let two women he loves tear each other apart. If you can't do that, then you are choosing one of them every time you stay silent. Silence always sides with the stronger system. In most cases, the stronger system is your mother's emotional control, because she has been practicing it longer. If you're a woman, stop convincing yourself that patience is virtue when it's actually self-betrayal. Silence can be submission. Endurance without boundaries can be slow collapse. Your dignity is not a luxury, it is the foundation of intimacy. And if you're both in this dynamic and you're reading this inside your own life, then listen carefully. The next conversation you have should not be about who is right. It should be about boundaries, responsibility, and consequences. If your husband cannot enforce your dignity, then the marriage is not unsafe because of your personality. It is unsafe because the structure refuses to protect you. And if the marriage is unsafe, love will keep shrinking. So here's your call to action, plain and direct. Tonight, decide to stop participating in the silent ownership war. If you are the man, schedule the boundary conversation and follow it with action. Stop feeding information to your mother that gives her leverage. Stop excusing disrespect with tradition. If you are the wife, stop bargaining with your self-respect. Choose one clear boundary you will enforce immediately, not after you're exhausted, and communicate it calmly but firmly. If you are the mother-in-law, stop treating your son like an emotional property and start treating him like an adult with a separate life, or you will eventually lose the connection you claim to protect. The war ends when someone finally chooses adulthood over emotional comfort. You don't get peace by hoping. You get peace by refusing the rules of a system that only works when you stay small. Rise and stand up. Not through slogans. Through boundaries that cost something. Through the courage to disturb the old pattern. Because the hidden self in this story is not your anger. It's your willingness to accept ownership disguised as love. Break that willingness, and the battlefield collapses. And remember this, so it actually lands. The conflict is not inevitable. It's maintained. It ends when power becomes honest and roles become clear.